The medium-term budget policy statement, as I said earlier, stated that local investors will now be able to trade in foreign domiciled companies where they were previously restricted by prudential limits. We discuss this further with Michelle Joubert, who's head of investor relations at the JSE. Thanks so much, Michelle, for joining us this afternoon. Let's take a look at this news that will most certainly impact the JSE moving forward. This whole story with inward listings, it's certainly something that the JSE has been lobbying for a long time. And you must be sighing some breath of relief that this has finally come through.
You know, we are absolutely delighted. For us, it's very, very positive. First of all, it means that investors, local investors, will be able to trade in these stocks in an unrestricted fashion. Secondly, it means that we'll be able to include the stocks in our indices. And that's great news because it means that the asset managers who track these stocks, and there are enormous funds behind the stocks, will be able to track these companies that have previously been restricted.
What are you anticipating in terms of things from a volume perspective, Michelle? I mean, just how much of an impact do you see this having on the kind of activity the JSE sees?
You know, we're at a very, very early stage. We have the policy, the intention, and we're really delighted with that. We think that Treasury has gradually been releasing or relaxing its exchange controls, and this is it's been a steady process. It's been a process that the market's been able to understand, and we think that it's very much in the market's favor. As far as liquidity is concerned, or as the increase in trade in the stocks, well, there's quite a lot of work to do first in order to really understand that. But in general terms, I think that we can say quite safely that this does allow more trade in those companies that are now going to become unrestricted members of those indices, and therefore it's going to be good for the market. It's going to be good for SA Inc. too, because anything that lifts restrictions on the South African market means that foreign investors are even more comfortable about putting their funds into the country.
And therein lying some of the opportunity for the JSE, because we know that troubles with exchange controls had acted as somewhat of a deterrent to new listings on the bourse, especially from the international environment. So take us through how you see that impacting that kind of dynamic.
Well, that certainly is one perspective, and it is a perspective that we've heard from some of the companies that were considering listing on the JSE. You know, at the moment, internationally, it's not a great time for listings, whether we're in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, due to the economy and various other factors, risks and uncertainties. But from a South African perspective, we know at the JSE that we are now able to put forward our proposal to the companies more easily. We're able to say to them, come into the country, investors can trade unrestricted in your stock. Investors are also able to participate in any capital or fundraising that you might be wanting to undergo. And this makes it just even more attractive as a listing venue. And that's something that we're looking forward to exploiting.
Of course, we're going to have to really, clarify the kind of investor that will be able to delve into here, because this pertaining specifically to institutional investors, right? And a distinction needing to be drawn in terms of just how much the retail investor actually can leverage off this.
Well, no, actually this does apply to all investors, but it is true that for individual investors, investing underneath that threshold that we're talking about, that threshold beyond which South African investors are not allowed to invest in foreign stocks, is not such an issue for many individual investors, and more of an issue for the fund managers who do have more funds to invest. However, it's a benefit for all of us.
Okay, how soon do you see this impacting the kind of weightings on the local bourse right now? We've been talking through the course of the day that we're going to start to see now the resource index specifically lose some of its stranglehold that it's had on the local bourse for the longest while.
You know, we've had this policy direction from Treasury, and as I've said, it's one that we welcome. However, there's a substantial amount of administrative work to do before we can really start implementing this change. The JSE needs to talk to National Treasury. We need to talk to the Financial Services Board. There are various other players that have been involved who we need to consult with. And it's really only going to be at that point that we're going to be able to say, well, these are the practical impacts. Because we know what the policy impacts are. The practical impacts, well, that's something that we're going to have to discuss. The other entity that's going to be involved in this is the JSE's own Index Advisory Committee. They next meet in December. This is not going to be something that's going to happen tomorrow, but it is something that we're very, very positive about.
Are you foreseeing at this stage any practical challenges, Michelle?
Well, it's early on. There's certainly nothing that I can see that's insurmountable. What I'm talking about is an amount of administration, of work that needs to be done. But I think that it's all doable, and therefore that's why we're so positive about it.
Well, best of luck to you, Michelle. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Michelle Joubert is Head of Investor Relations over at the JSE.